Welcome to the Brown County Hour.
Coming to you from the legendary Hills of Brown,
where the plum purple haze,
the one nature herself drapes over the hills and hollers,
inspires local characters, artists, and nature lovers.
It's as though the hills themselves conspire to create a beauty and culture in the heart of Indiana.
Sit for a spell and hear the music.
Tall tales,
true stories,
and current goings-on.
Brought to you by folks who still know how to sit by a fire in winter
and swim buck naked in summer.
Welcome to episode 69 of the Brown County Hour. This is Vera Grubbs.
And Dave Seastrom, along with the rest of the crew. This month, we had the pleasure to interview Joe Bolinger. He was kind enough to make a live recording in our studio of 3 songs from his new CD, From Men to Beasts. The CD was recorded with his musical partner, Dakota Curtis, and their group, The Lean and Plenty.
Dave Seastrom brings us his reflections on the backcountry. We have an interview with Bill Miller about his book, Son of a Coal Miner's Daughter. And we share an interview with Jim Connor and Cara Huddleston about foraging.
Chuck Wills shares an end-of-the-year reflection called Old Books and New Perspectives. Jim Eagleman waxes poetically about the humble possum, and Rick Fettig gives us a few words about discipline.
In our first segment, we have our interview with Joe Bolinger. Dave Seastrom shares his thoughts about the backcountry, and we'll close with one of Joe's tunes, Waltz a While.
So it's my pleasure to introduce Joe Bolinger, who is with us this evening and has just graced us with 4 excellent live performances on his banjo and guitar. They've got The Lean and Plenty, which is just one of the bands that he plays with, has a new CD coming out called From Men to Beasts. I think this reflects some kind of attitude. You want to share some of the thinking behind that title?
Well, it comes from one of the songs I just played for you, my werewolf song. And the line is, transform us from men to beasts, shouldn't great men watch out for the least. It's kind of just a theme for the record. It is kind of some dark times right now, and so the record is reflective of that. There's some... In
a cheerful sort of way? Or
No, not at all.
Not at all,
no,
okay.
No,
darkness for darkness' sake.
Well, one of the hallmarks of my songwriting is that I write songs that sound like they're happy, but they're not.
But there's a bluegrass reality to all of that.
Yeah, that's definitely really the heart and soul of traditional music. If you go back and listen to it, it's like a lot of murder ballads.
Oh, yeah. Pretty little girl, take her down the river and drown her.
Exactly,
right.
exactly. So we are connected to that tradition and are kind of trying to consciously acknowledge we're part of that tradition. Yeah, there's a lot of darkness in our music, but there's also some sweet songs on the record. So we're trying to sort of capture the idea that we all have some darkness in us, but we can get past it.
Joe, you have been playing in Brown County. I mean, you grew up here, but you've been playing with a whole variety of different bands, including the Indiana Boys and Dakota Joe, which apparently is now morphed into the Lean and Plenty. And you write great songs that Keenan Rainwater has performed and recorded. And, of course, you guys record your own songs. And so tell us about making this particular CD. Where did you do the recording?
We did all the recording in the basement of our drummer's garage.
This sounds authentic.
Yes. We couldn't afford to pay for studio time to go in and do this in a professional studio, at least the recording part. So he was generous enough to donate his time and space, and miracle of miracles, it happened. We all had to learn the software while we were recording it. So that was a huge learning curve. We'd all done some recording in the past, but we really didn't know what we were doing. So somehow or another, over a course of 10 months in a sometimes hot, sometimes cold garage basement, we got it done.
Once you had the basic recording, did you take it somewhere and mix it, or did
That's
you?
what we're doing that right now. We're actually working with another Brown County guy, artist, musician, and audio engineer, Derek Day. And he works out of Primary Sound Studios, which is just outside of Bloomington. So Derek has been mixing the CD along with our help and input, but he really has the technological know-how for all kinds of post-production stuff that we would have no idea how to do. So that's been great, and it is just about done. It just needs to get mastered, and then we can send it off.
So you're thinking it'll be out by Christmas then?
Yes, I think so. Knock on wood.
This Christmas?
This Christmas. Yeah. Stocking stuffer.
Yeah, there you go. Musical labels, we all know that they really mean almost nothing. But, you do play traditional bluegrass instruments, but the addition of a drummer.
Yeah, we're definitely moved away from the original Dakota Joe sound. That was the original name of the band. It was just me and my friend Dakota Curtis. He played acoustic guitar. I play banjo. But we realized that it's hard to get people's attention with just those two instruments, especially if you're not a beautiful person to look at on stage. And we realized we needed to do something else to mix it up. And so we put together a backing band, the idea being for different shows we can rotate through, kind of have a bullpen, if you will, of musicians that we can call up for different shows. And so that's what we've done, and we have a drummer, we have a mandolin player, we have a double bass player, and an electric guitar player. So when everyone's on stage, it's definitely more of a folk rock, roots rock sound. But not everyone is on stage for every show. So sometimes it's more bluegrassy, sometimes it has more of a traditional country sound, and sometimes it's really more rock and roll.
Well, that brings up a good point. So what were your early musical influences? I mean, what led you to where you are now?
It's a little bit of confusion probably because I chose to play banjo, but I never really listened to that much banjo music in my free time. I definitely liked classic rock and some folk stuff, but more of the singer-songwriter type of folk music, Bob Dylan, Chris Christopherson, and things like that. So that really kind of was the emphasis for me is songwriting, singer-songwriters, and rock and roll. Meanwhile, I'm playing banjo, so I'm learning bluegrass licks, and I'm learning bluegrass songs, and eventually decided I wanted to learn to play, traditional clawhammer, which is a bit of an older style than bluegrass picking. So it's been a mixed bag.
So from Stairway to Heaven to
Mike Seeger,
okay.
All the Seegers,
Okay.
One of my favorite collections of music is the Anthology of American Folk Music, which is a lot of really old-time blues and...
That's a Smithsonian production.
Yeah,
isn't it?
yeah.
Yeah, I grew up on that album.
Yeah, I've listened to that a lot. So I like all that kind of real old-timey, funky stuff, and I also really like Primus, and I really like Tom Petty and things like that.
So do you guys, is there a website or a Facebook page? I mean, if we want to follow you and know where you're going to be playing, is there a way to do that?
The best way to know where we're playing is to like our page on Facebook, which is just go to Facebook and search for The Lean and the Plenty. We also have a website where we'll be selling the record when it's out, and that's just theleanandtheplenty.com. We also have a Bandcamp site where you can actually hear some of the recordings, stream them. That's theleanandtheplenty.bandcamp.com. Find us on all that stuff. We're on YouTube. We have videos up. Just Google us. You'll find us.
Excellent. Well, Joe, thank you so much for coming in and sharing your music with us. It's a real pleasure.
Thank you very much. It's been my pleasure.
As I write this, it's just a few days until Thanksgiving. I'm thinking about the holidays and, as you might guess, things that I'm thankful for. Of course, I'm grateful for family and friends and loyal animal companions, having a dry roof over my head, and not going hungry. These things are not true for everyone, but I hope they are for you. Lately, I've been thinking about something that I'm also grateful for that's much bigger than me, and during the holiday season, it seems appropriate to share some of my thoughts. My wife and I are most fortunate to live in a beautiful, undisturbed section of Yellowwood Forest. Our property hasn't been logged since the mid-60s, and it will only take another 200 years before this forest becomes truly mature. To be sure, we have many trees that are every bit of 100 years old, and you might say the forest we live in is well on its way. The point I'm trying to make is a forest only has one path to reach maturity, and the simple truth is the only way this can happen is consistent devotion by several generations of comparatively short-lived human beings. If just one generation of humans along the way decides that the greatest value in a forest is a short-term capital gain, all of the work of preceding generations vanishes with the sound of chainsaws and giant trees crashing to the ground. In the not-so-distant past, Indiana was almost completely covered by virgin forest. Many of the trees that comprised this forest were hundreds of years old, and it was not unusual to find giants that were many feet across. The woods were filled with woodland bison, elk, black bear, beaver, white-tailed deer, and mountain lions. The rivers ran clean and clear, and there were otters, turtles, mussels, eels, sturgeon, gar, and many other fishes of every description. The Native Americans who lived here hunted and fished, but their numbers were small and they only took what they needed. All of that changed when European settlement occurred. Here, in the heart of the old Northwest Territory, the influx of newcomers began with French traders, who worked hand in hand with the native population trapping valuable fur bearers until most of them disappeared. Not long after that, settlers began to arrive, and the first casualty was the great forests of northern Indiana. These were cleared to produce some of the best farmland in the world. And with this loss of habitat, so went the many animals that needed this environment to survive. The unglaciated southern portion of the state wasn't completely logged until much later. There are a few reasons for this, but mostly the terrain wasn't suitable for good farmland. This fact didn't stop the early settlers of Brown County, and many acres of steep hillsides were farmed until the soil washed out and would no longer produce a crop. When the first timber barons arrived in the late 1800s, Brown County was ripe for the pickings. Eventually, hundreds of locals were employed logging the forest, and Helmsburg, Indiana was a central hub in the logging industry. It boasted several sawmills and a large dance hall where people gathered on Saturday night to drink, dance, and fistfight. Somewhere along the way, they must have seen it coming. When the last of the giant old trees were hauled to the mill, the timber boom was over, and suddenly there were no jobs. There wasn't any forest either, and the critters who lived there went the way of the timber, and suddenly there was no way to make a living. By the time of the Great Depression, half of our population had left the county. The people who hung on did so by subsistent farming. A quote I've often heard is, "We were poor, but we didn't know it because everyone lived that way." Slowly but surely, the forest began to regenerate. White-tailed deer from Michigan were reintroduced, and Brown County kids got summer jobs planting pine trees to halt erosion. 120-plus years later, through a process of benign neglect, our forests have returned. One of the most mature old-growth areas in the entire state forest is known as the backcountry. This area was set aside for preservation in the early 1980s by then-Governor Robert D. Orr. He felt so strongly about forest conservation, one of the inscriptions on his tombstone is an old Chinese proverb that says, "It's a wise man who plants a tree whose shade he will never enjoy." Recently, 300 acres of timber was sold from this precious area. As I reflect on gratitude this season, I am grateful for the many hundreds of people who have taken a stand to stop this from happening. I'm proud to associate with good-hearted Hoosiers working to protect our environment from greed and mismanagement. I like to believe that even if you never go hiking in this great forest, most, if not all Hoosiers want this area protected. As I celebrate the holidays, I'll raise a glass to all who are working to protect our legacy, not for us, but for the yet-to-be born. I think Governor Robert Orr would agree. This is Dave Seastrom. See you next time.
You stole your gown. It was prettier than we are now. And you were anxious to leave this town and sighs. You said the city would be our home, where we could be alone and do it all on our own before we die. Hey, 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 1, 2, 3, come waltz a while with me. We move so silently in our minds. Hey, 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 4, 5, 6, it's the sorrow that's making you sick. But our bag just ran out of tricks, and that's life. And we lived above the club, the music would rise above, and we'd dance in the darkness in love every night. And that city was in our hearts, with tacos and walks in the park, and those street lights that doubled as stars in our sky. Hey, 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 1, 2, 3, come waltz a while with me. We move so silently in our minds. Hey, 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 4, 5, 6, it's the sorrow that's making you sick. But our bag just ran out of tricks, and that's life. You were right, the cure for our sickness was nobody minding our business, and the greatest of all of the gifts is to be free. And we'd go where we wanted to go, stay out late, see any show, but then our money got low. That's on me. Hey, hey, 1, 2, 3, come waltz a while with me. We move so silently in our minds. Hey, 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 4, 5, 6, it's the sorrow that's making you sick. But our bag just ran out of tricks, and that's life. And I think it was your idea to rob the taqueria, wear a mask so they wouldn't see. What a plan. But that taco man pulled a gun, and in a blink the deed was done. You shot him, took all his funds, and then we ran. And the jury gave us both 40 to life. That's okay, you said you'd do the same. And I'll remember your hand squeezing mine tight long after they forget our name. Hey, 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 1, 2, 3, come waltz a while with me. Come waltz a while with me.
Now we pause for station identification.
You are listening to the Brown County Hour on volunteer-powered community radio, WFHB, at 100.7 in Brown County, 91.3 and 98.1 in Bloomington, 106.3 at Ellettsville, and online at wfhb.org.
Segment 2 begins with an interview with Bill Miller about his book, Son of a Coal Miner's Daughter. Jim Connor and Cara Huddleston discuss foraging in Brown County. And we'll finish this portion of the show with Joe Bolinger's song, Cataclysm.
It's my pleasure to introduce Bill Miller, who was a long-time Brown County character, and he has written a memoir that is really interesting called Son of a Coal Miner's Daughter. Thanks for coming in, Bill. Not everybody writes their memoirs, but you have a lot of interesting things in your book. You've lived a long and interesting life.
Yeah, I've been fortunate to have a long life and lots of roads to travel down. Most of those, of course, starting here in Brown County. And I wanted to write a book about those experiences so that I could share those and keep some of the history of not only Brown County, but of other people that I met along the way alive. It took me 2.5 years to write it and 2.5 years to edit it and get it published. I'd been wanting to write it for a long time, but a sudden onset of an illness in 2011 put me in the hospital, and while I was there, a friend came in, handed me a pen and a journal and said, "Bill, you've been talking about writing your memoir. Now do it." I was terribly frightened by the illness, something called transverse myelitis. I was paralyzed from the waist down. So I started writing to get my mind off of myself. And it was great therapy, and I wrote 948 pages in longhand and about 140,000 words before I finished. But during that 2.5 years was my rehabilitation time. And at the end, then I wanted to start getting it published. So it was quite a journey.
I enjoyed the book. You are very honest about some of your childhood struggles with your father and some of the difficulties that posed for you, but you persevered. You kept looking for opportunities. You are obviously an optimistic person. My favorite part of the book is the fact that you kept seeing new horizons. Here you are in the middle of nowhere, Brown County, and you end up in the Peace Corps and Tonga and...
Yeah, that part of the book, a lot of people talk about abuse, but it's an important subject, so I wanted to put it in my book to let people know you can have abuse growing up and still have a very successful life, especially if you keep an optimistic view and keep the idea of the glass is half full, because if you don't, it can just be a cycle that can be repeated on forever. And fortunately, I was able to meet the right people and have mentors that helped me move forward. I think without mentors and other people helping you, it is almost impossible. And of course, most of us know that that's a key to most people's success, is somebody else helping them. Also, I wanted people to know that in reference to my father, that you don't want to judge people by just one part of their life. You want to judge them about the totality of their life. I hope that came out in the book.
Well, that's the way I felt about it, too. Your father was obviously a successful person who had a lot of things going on. The farm stuff that you described where he just was into absolutely everything. Of course, now you were the one responsible to take care of it all. Yeah. But he would start all of this stuff. And he worked for Block, right? The department.
For Ayers.
LS Ayers, right. So obviously he was a complex individual himself.
Yeah. And then, of course, part of the story of my book is that my mother, the coal miner's daughter, was from Benham, Harlan County, Kentucky, and one of the poorest counties in America. And my grandfather was born in 1870, which doesn't sound possible, 5 years after the Civil War. And she was one of 10 children. So her story's in there, how she got away from there and came to Indiana and met my father. Yeah, well, I wanted also for the Brown County part to talk about what it was like in Brown County before the Second World War and then after the Second World War, and then what it was like to go to a one-room school in Bean Blossom and Helmsburg High School, and then to go to Franklin College and Eastern Illinois University, where I graduated from. I also wanted people with the idea of Peace Corps, that in essence, Peace Corps is about peace. It's about people to people and giving people a hand up and something they can't sell or corrupt, and that's knowledge. And this is what America needs more of, rather than giving arms and equipment and money to foreign countries. We need to give them knowledge so they can help themselves. And it's one of the best ideas. And of course, it was President Kennedy's idea, or at least the people he was in touch with. And I think that we're missing that today. I think President Kennedy would be very, very disappointed to hear what's going on today.
I suspect you're right.
That period of time, many of us felt if we had not served military, which I didn't, then we wanted to serve anyway, so we went into Peace Corps. Many of us really listened to his speech. Ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country meant something back then. And also the idea that developing sensitivity and help to other countries, not invade them and bomb them from drones, was not the idea. At that time, it was to be respectful of other countries and try to give them a hand up as well.
So your book covers your time in Brown County, your time in the Peace Corps, and it also touches on the entire Dean Wilderness and all of that, which you were deeply involved with for over a decade.
Yeah, that was a big part of my life, and I hope that my next book will be called Battle at Nebo Ridge, because when I came back to Brown County in 1973, they were going to take my property for a wilderness area, and we didn't oppose the idea of a wilderness, although at that time we didn't know what it was in 73. They said, oh yes, the government can take your property, and I said, no, I don't think so. So it took 10 years and lots of hard work and money, and at the end of 10 years we worked out a compromise. It was a very, very difficult time to make a living and at the same time fight Forest Service and the government.
Well, yes, as John Muir said, it's absolutely shameful that we have to fight our government to preserve nature.
Yeah, it's one of the problems, and I think it's confusing when you say have to fight the government for your property, because we are the government. There's not something separate out there, and I think a lot of people want to treat it that way, but we're really the government. But you have to get their attention sometime, and the best way you can get their attention is give them bad publicity, because otherwise, if you go in the court, you can't fight the lawyers and the money on the other side. We still have freedom of the press. Truth is that that's the dearest thing we have in democracy, is the freedom of speech. And hopefully we'll be able to keep that.
Your book, I really enjoyed it. You know, I'm a longtime Brown County person myself. It was very interesting to hear your description of some of the old timers that I actually remember. I think that even if you're new to Brown County and you don't know anything about it, you would enjoy this book, and I suggest that everyone get a copy of Son of a Coal Miner's Daughter. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us.
Oh, great. Well, thank you so much for the opportunity to come in and talk about it.
Hey there, it's Carrie Ray with the Brown County Hour, and I'm sitting here in the studio with the rest of the crew, and Jim Connor and Cara Huddleston. And they've each been in before and talked to us individually. Jim came in and talked about mushrooms, and Cara came in and talked to us a little bit about medicinal and wild edibles she can find in the woods. But we wanted to have them back together because another thing that I know about them is, well, first of all, that they're a couple, and that these two have foraging as a major component of how they feed themselves. Tell us a little bit about, how you met.
We met here in Brown County, and I think we both, that's what kind of drew us together a lot, was we both share the same interests in nature and all things wild, and foraging together is a great pastime for us,
So is it something that just sort of happened, or did you sort of have this conversation like, we're going to set this goal that a certain percentage of our diet is going to be foraged?
I've always foraged my whole life, on and off at different times, more extensively than others, sometimes purely because of poverty, because I needed something to eat. So, and there's a whole abundance of free things in the woods, and also fishing and game gathering and all. And it's also is that I feel that the wild food and stuff that we gather is better for you than commercially raised food, because it's as natural and it's as wild and it's as organic as it can get,
So Cara, is it something you've been into also?
I've always had a love for plants. The foraging came more when I met Jim, just because he loved plants the same way that I did. That was a beautiful connection. And, I knew, but I wasn't as big of a hunter-gatherer as Jim, but obviously I was always interested in, and I've learned a lot through him.
Well, I think Jim was saying there's something kind of, I don't know what it is, intriguing or exciting when you put out a meal and it's basically all found or foraged food. That's, that's, talk about self-reliance, right? That's a hot topic these days.
Yeah, it is high. I've done it over the years, made meals, and sometimes not even on purpose, realizing, that once you sit down, it's like, oh, everything on this table, there's venison there's fish we caught, there's plantain. The whole meal comes from something you've gathered, and it's good, it tastes good, it's healthy for you, and it's all wild caught. And it's a sustainable way to do things. It's a fresh way to live. It's like when you catch the fish, you clean the fish and you grab the plantain and you may find some wild ramps along the road and some other things, and you put together a meal, and it's a natural balance to do that,
It can be a really collective way to live. It can build community as far as if you're working together, knowing where people are harvesting and foraging and having, I think Jim and I have talked about that a lot, having a sense of community, and that can happen within, especially there's so much beauty and wild plants. And the thing
is to have a great respect for the things that you're foraging and taking, and not taking those resources and turning them into money. You can see it with the morel mushroom thing in the spring. The price of morel mushrooms goes up to this crazy price, and so people hunt them for money. Well, that's what's wrong with our world today, is we're trading resources for money. And if people only took only what they need, there would be plenty for everyone, And the other thing is with the mushrooms is to put the spores back. If you take mushrooms and you clean them, don't dump your mushroom water down the sink. Take it back and let the spores get a chance to reestablish themselves. That way you're, that's part of the cycle.
And what kind of bags you're using. You don't want to be using, a trash bag. You want to be using an onion bag or something where the animals can, and the spores fall through. There's just so many little things that we can do to be better stewards of the land.
It's a thing that's happened that I've noticed around the state and in Brown County especially, is a recent, logging. And I've got a picture I posted. It was one of my favorite mushroom hunting spots, up on Du Bois Ridge. I went to last year in the spring, and it was gone. It was completely gone. And so those mushrooms aren't going to grow there. Now, because there's lots of decayed tree tops and stuff, other mushrooms will go. That's taking too much, I'm certainly not opposed to all logging because we use lumber, but there is a sustainable and a right way to harvest things, and by leaving our old growth timber, because there are so many mushrooms and natural plant medicines and things that grow in the forest that once you change that ecosystem, they're not there anymore, And,
That's right.
and
Well, and if you look at cancer rates where there's forests and where there's not, I mean, it's undeniable.
Right.
I mean,
and it hasn't been that long ago that that's what we depended on for food, was what we gathered,
Sure.
People took venison, and people knew all the medicinals and knew how to make poultices if they were hurt. And I can see it coming back, which makes me wonder, is this some predetermined thing where people are learning the old ways again? But one of the things with technology that I embrace is the learning. Some people hate this technology, but I carry my smartphone in my pocket, and when I get to the forest and I find something that I have a question about or I don't know about, I have instant identification access, to learn something about what I'm looking at.
Yeah.
That I
Well,
don't
I think
understand.
that's like, for the most part, any particular technology or anything else is inherently evil. A lot of it lies in application.
Right,
So,
exactly. It's all how you use it.
yeah,
Yeah.
I mean,
That's all how you
balance.
But in Brown
Balance,
County,
right.
we have, that's one of the reasons I stay in this county, is the abundance of plants that are here. And
I mean, you always say you go all over and you come back to Brown County and it's always home and it's always the natural beauty here is like no other place.
Yeah, there's no other place like it, any place. And I've been, all over, and I always want to come back here. And a lot of it's, like I said, it's a very special.
Yeah.
If you fly over Brown County, if you've ever had to fly and you come over Brown County, and it's a patchwork quilt of mono agriculture, and then all of a sudden there's this green island that sits off by itself, and you're like, what is that? It's like it is. It's like an island, and it's Brown County with the forest. It's like it's an amazing place. And we need to protect it.
Yeah. Well, I know you won't find any dissenters around here that Brown County is one of the most beautiful places we can ever imagine being. And thanks for teaching us a little bit more about how to feed ourselves with it, too.
Yeah, I would just say just learn. If you have an interest in it, research and learn and spend time out in the forest and teach yourself. That's the best way. And
Jim Connor and Cara Huddleston in the studio here at the Brown County Hour. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Carrie.
Samson in the temple, Daniel in the lion's den. Everything that happened once is happening again. Joseph in his pretty coat, Elijah in the sky. All the modern prophets saying, boy, we're bound to die. And it's death, fire, wallow in the mire. What's bound can't be undone. Boom, crash, watch it all collapse. You might as well have some fun. This is the end, boys. This is the end, boys. It's the end of all time. What kind of cataclysm will spell the end this time? Pestilence or an asteroid falling from the sky? Will we roast alive or blow it up, drain the whole thing dry? Either way, it's safe to say the end is surely nigh. And it's death, fire, wallow in the mire. What's bound can't be undone. Boom, crash, watch it all collapse. You might as well have some fun. This is the end, boy. This is the end, boys. It's the end of all time. Ezekiel in the boneyard, Joshua on the wall. One thing's been made clear to me, pride goes before the fall. Nathan before David, warning him to turn. A thing not figured out in time is a thing that won't be learned. And it's death, fire, wallow in the mire the sinner cannot hold. And boom, crash, watch it all collapse. You can't say you weren't told. This is the end, boys. This is the end, boys. It's the end of all time. And we had our share of chances, we had our little run. Now it's time for something else's moment in the sun. It's not a fluke, not an accident, get the grade we've earned. So kiss your wife, hug your kids, sit back and watch it burn. Time comes for a cleansing, Wipe the whole slate clean, vaporize all the wasted lies, the stupid and the mean. That's just what we are, boys, awful to our bones. Let's act our age, clear the stage, leave this world alone. Let's act our age and clear the stage, leave this world alone. Let's act our age and clear the stage and leave this poor old world alone.
Now we pause for station identification.
You are listening to the Brown County Hour on volunteer-powered community radio, WFHB, at 100.7 in Brown County, 91.3 and 98.1 in Bloomington, 106.3 in Ellettsville, and online at wfhb.org.
In the final segment, we begin with Chuck Wills, who will share his reflections on the new year. Jim Eagleman tells us about possums. Rick Fettig gives us his perspective on discipline, and we'll close with the Joe Bolinger song, Werewolf.
The other day I did something that may be considered unusual in these modern times. I ordered a book, an actual paper book, and had it shipped to the house. In these days of iPads and Kindles, this may be considered a little strange. If you can have thousands of pages packed into glowing screens, why on earth would you abandon that for paper? You see, this book happened to be an old one, not published since the 1940s, and was shipped from a library in Canada. Upon opening that box, the room was instantly filled with that old library smell. You remember the one, slightly stale, a little papery, serious. The tactile sensation of a cloth cover and pulpy paper under the fingertips can't be duplicated by a slick screen. At least not yet. It's a ritual, like putting on a vinyl record. It's thick with the intention of getting down to the business of reading. Quietly, like your librarian would want it. As I flipped through the chapters, I paused to ponder how books reflect life. There's a certain amount of predictability in our world, and like the rise and fall of the sun, as one chapter closes, another one opens, right up till there's no more pages. Now, our bright colors of autumn have given way to hills of buckskin bark and muted hues, and the morning dew recast itself as fog and then again into frost. It's as if the earth is saying, sleep now, rest, and try again in the next chapter. The earth knows, everything in rhythm, everything in rhyme, spring to spring and summer to summer, all new chapters that may rhyme with the last, and likely the next. That's the thing about rhymes. They relate, they come back as reflections of each other. But they are certainly different. Different words, different seasons, different chapters. Now, I don't want to imply that we all are just passengers as we flip through to the next chapter. No, like it or not, you and I are at least scribbling in the margins as these pages fly by. Maybe in pencil, maybe in pen, that's up to you. You may not consider yourself an author, but you are, in fact, writing what becomes your story, and the foundation of whatever comes next. Your story, just like mine, becomes woven into the greater rhythm and rhyme, together. So now we hover in the liminal space between chapter 2017 and 2018. What have we written? What story do you want to write? Does it rhyme with something that makes you smile? I hope so. I know that my story is currently about the inevitability of me losing my car keys and my wallet. Again, just like last year. I hope that your story is a good one, funny, smart, and kind. I hope it's exactly what you want it to be. And I hope someday we can open our book, the one with the old library smell, flip back through its pulpy pages and say, we made it through another, maybe just by the skin of our teeth. So grasp your old book close, keep scribbling in the margins, and I'll see you in the next chapter.
The other day I saw an opossum scamper up a hill when I was on a walk. The little critter wasn't an adult, but a subadult. Some call a juvie, short for juvenile. This animal made me recall all the things we used to inform the public about the opossums at our park nature talks. Namely, that the opossum is a survivor. I have no doubt this little guy will do fine this winter. Also called polecat, woods rat, or forest kitty, I've heard. The possum is a relic of times gone by. We understand that a critter not too much changed from today's version was living at the time of the dinosaurs. If that isn't a testament to survivability, I don't know what is. So when you see an opossum, what is it that allows it to last all this time on the face of the earth? Ask yourself, what qualities does it possess to make it nearly invincible? Take a look at this critter the next time you see one poking around your compost pile, or woodshed, or lumbering down the county road. Never in a hurry, this ambling gait of the animal, it's a sideways lumbering walk, makes you assume it is slow thinking in addition to slow walking, maybe even dumb or witless. No, its slow, calculated manner has helped it avoid trouble, like dogs, people, and predators, even cars, but of course, not all cars. We tend to see more possums hit along the roads more than any other Indiana fur bearer, my DNR biologist's friend tell me, when they conduct their annual road-killed counts of coons and deer. If confronted, we know their defense mechanism is to play dead, with saliva pouring out of its mouth as they assume a curled-up posture. And all you did was maybe touch it with a stick. This feigning death act has helped the possum avoid almost every attempt to attack or kill it. What predator sees it necessary to continue with their murderous attack if the prey instantly lies limp, motionless, even defecating and rolling in its own feces? Of course, the predator gives up, moves on, and the opossum soon responds from its sleep-like trance and continues its life of scavenging and sampling all the food it can while on its hunting forays. It may be their wide, varied diet that has helped it survive, too. They are omnivorous, meaning they eat crayfish, garbage, anything, left-out cat food, worms, birds, eggs, fruit, roots, nuts, garden produce like corn, squash, tomatoes, and beans, slugs, frogs, grasses, mushrooms, salamanders, the list goes on. Such a varied diet, even carrion, road-killed crows, coons, even other opossums, has allowed this animal to adjust to man's ever-changing environment. It isn't fussy where it lives either, as we know them to take up residency in culverts, brush piles, dumps, junkyards, and other refuse places man creates. So it eats everything it comes upon and lives anywhere it wants. You can bet we'll have the possum with us for millennia to come. I once observed a mother possum crawling out from a dead cow carcass in a field. The bloated body of the cow gave it shelter, all the food it needed, and yep, a quick look inside, there were little babies, maybe 7 of them, waiting for the mother to return. Its 50 teeth, the most of any North American mammal, will certainly help it attack any food item, even hard-shelled mussels, skeletons of small mammals for their calcium, even dried-up, sun-baked cow flesh. The possum is not picky. You know it to be a member of the marsupials, like kangaroos, those mammals with specialized pouches for the developing young. Born as blind, hairless, tiny versions, they find their way into the nursery inside the mother's pouch. The young stay attached to milk teats for weeks while she continues her life. This is theorized to say the opossums may have helped its future generations with this natal attention. The young are almost all taken care of in the pouch as they mature, nurse, and get strong. Lately, we've heard the opossum's tendency for pest control. That's to rid the garden of injurious slugs, keeps cockroaches at bay, and they eat many, many ticks. All these admirable traits of an animal that surely deserves our admiration rather than any disdain. And those opposable thumbs? No, not all thumbs. Technically, toes on their rear feet are called hallux. These digits help in climbing and handling finely detailed food, or even to pick at locks, even latches, to open gates and storage boxes, not to mention the prehensile tail, which is adapted for grasping and wrapping around tree limbs. It can hang from its tail for short periods of time, but it doesn't sleep, hanging upside down as some people may think. They've been observed carrying clumps of grass and other materials for a burrow or cavity by looping their tail around it. The awesome possum, another critter living in the Brown County hills, occupying its niche, doing its thing to add to our glorious assembly of Indiana wildlife, here for us to see and watch, admire and enjoy. Oh, one more thing. Why did the chicken cross the road? To prove to the opossum it could be done. Jim Eagleman, WFHB-FM, the Brown County Hour. Thanks for listening.
I'd like to take this opportunity to talk a little bit about discipline. No, not the discipline implied or imposed on you like a drill sergeant, or a grade school nun that cracks your knuckles with a ruler? As I try to incorporate some changes in my own life, I've been weighing out the parameters of self-discipline. As the pendulum swings, there's the side of making decisions, goals, and objectives, and then getting her done. And then there's the side of take what comes at you in life and make the most of it. Let's take running, or any type of exercise. But do you make it a discipline and run a specific distance and a specific number of days per week? Or do you run to catch the bus and a toddler on the loose? I suppose running might be considered a health issue, but I'm not sure Jesus went jogging, but was rather disciplined in prayer and meditation. And he was pretty healthy until he started feeling some aches and pains later in life. Music, do you practice daily and incorporate new information and techniques and then rehearse prior to a performance? Or do you learn a few chords and songs so you can sing around the campfire as occasion permits? There's nothing wrong with either approach, but note the varying degrees of application between the two. What about food and its consumption? As children, we were provided our food without much say in the matter, and survived and grew up rather contently and successfully. I recently heard a statement that simplified an approach to buying food. If sugar is within the first 3 ingredients, put it back on the shelf. I've been trying to apply that principle, but now that I'm reading the labels before I buy, it's become an ordeal, though positive, but it's an ordeal and an excursion to go grocery shopping. So again, is food consumption necessarily a discipline, a social pleasantry, or the most convenient drive-through? How clean is your house? How and when do the dishes get done? Are your shoes in a pile, or are they lined up in pairs on the appropriate shelf? Are your long sleeve and short sleeve shirts separated into groups, or just all mixed together? How about your paperwork? Is everything filed away neatly, or is it all separated into piles? It should be obvious the varying degrees of dedication and discipline, or lack thereof, required in all aspects of life. We all have a certain tolerance and level of accomplishment toward what we want in life, and a certain lucrative levels of our basic needs in life. We may want a lot out of life, but may not have the know-how, the wherewithal, the energy, or the discipline required to achieve our desired goals and dreams. This leads to frustration and a feeling of incompetence and lack of success. You probably won't win a Grammy without putting a lot of energy into your music and the music business. It would be rare for someone to give you $1 million, so you have to work for it. You'll have to meet the right people, make the right decisions and investments, and so on. If you're happy and content singing around the campfire, and you don't mind if your shirts and dresses are all mixed together, then you don't need a Grammy or $1 million. A successful life is when your wants and needs are parallel. You don't need to be a nutritionist to eat well, but if you want, you can pick up a little bit here and there and improve your diet. If you don't want to practice a musical instrument for hours on end, you just need to play enough to entertain your friends and family on holidays or at the campfire. Like the pendulum, there's a balance to life. Discipline versus, shall we say, freelance. Regimented versus loosey-goosey. If what you want in life equals what you need in life, wants and needs being parallel, you should do well. I know there's a balance in life. I see it every time I swing by. This is Rick Fettig, just saying.
Line up in an oxy and heroin and grass. Better slow down if you wanna move fast. Yuppies playing hicks, crying for the past. Careful what you wish don't bite you in the ass. You better count your blessings before they're gone. I might just show up in your backyard with my fur strapped on. Take my hand, pretty girl, we can go to the clearing in the woods, through the snow where nothing good ever seems to grow. We can see the sky when the full moon glows. That same old feeling in our feet, rising up like the mercury, it transforms us from men to beasts. Shouldn't great men watch out for the leaves. You better count your blessings before they're gone. I might come tapping at your window with my claws strapped on. Ah, whoa, whoa. Ah, whoa, whoa. Y'all move down here like drowning rats for simple life. Welcome out, well, we ain't all bibs and bullet hats. History costs a little more than that. And you only see what you wanna see. Not this place or its poverty. Well, this is real life, not a fantasy. We're all a little more than we seem to be. And that moon's been waxing now for days. Thought about killing you 1,000 ways. Smell exactly where your grandkid plays. What can I say? I guess I'm going through a phase. You better count your blessings before they're gone. I might come knocking at your front door with my teeth strapped on. Ah, whoa, whoa. Ah, whoa, whoa. Take my hand, pretty girl. We'll become every time they laughed and called us dumb. And every single con they've run, every desperate addiction, and every job we never got. All the speed, all the party, all our dreams that turned to right for what is real and for what is not. You better count your blessings before they're gone. I might just show up in your bedroom with my knife strapped on. Ah, whoa, whoa. Ah, whoa, whoa. Ah.
Thanks for tuning in to episode 69 of the Brown County Hour, recorded in our studio in the History Center here in downtown Nashville, and brought to you the first Sunday of every month at 9 a.m. and the following Wednesday at 5:30 p.m.
The Brown County Hour is brought to you by a diverse group of folks who believe now more than ever that the world is for everyone.
This show was produced by
Chuck Wills,
Pam Rader,
Rick Fettig,
Vera Grubbs.
Carrie Ray.
and Dave Seastrom. We would also like to thank Slats Klug for our theme music. You have been listening to the Brown County Hour.
Coming to you from deep in the woods of Brown County, Indiana.
celebrating the arts, culture, and nature that make this such a unique community.
Visit us online at browncountyhour.com.
The Brown County Hour is a production of WFHB.
Volunteer-powered, listener-supported community radio for South Central Indiana.
Take me back to my old Brown County home.